Hey guys, what up? Total Control 871, and I'm chiming in with a little bit of headline news. I believe I spoke very briefly on, actually I didn't speak at all. I was saying about opioids in my Black Rider Down video when I was hit by a car and the type of prejudice that, people with severe injuries will face when it comes to pain management. And I said that I didn't really want to get into it then because, well, that's like a whole rant in and of itself. Well, today is that rant. All right, once again, utilizing my nifty little in-app feature. Just going to move our camera out of the way, and I'm going to scroll to the top of our article. This is coming to us from NBC. Which one of it? It's got like a whole bunch of different NBCs and shit. NBC News. NBC News off of their Facebook page and things of the sorts like that. All right, this is entitled As Drug Sentencing Debate Rages, Ridiculous Sentences Persist. And we have a picture here of a strapping young white man. Let's see, Leo Guthmiller, Guthmiller. Guthmiller, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Leo Guthmiller. The picture is captioned as outside his apartment in Lincoln, Nebraska, the day before he turned himself in at a federal prison to start a 10-year drug sentence. Wow, that shit is harsh. I knew that right away. I really didn't have to read very much of the article to know exactly what they were talking about. Let's see, it says here, when he was addicted and a petty criminal, Leo knew little and cared less about the federal government's harsh drug sentencing laws. The worst he'd endure was 90 days at the county lockup in Lincoln, Nebraska. Then last April, nearly 2 years after he stopped popping painkillers and smoking methamphetamine, Guthmiller was arrested by 2 federal agents as he headed for a drug counseling session. He later learned why. A junkie and his girlfriend, facing stiff prison sentences of their own, had told investigators that Guthmiller had introduced them to his meth dealer around the time he was getting sober. That made him the middleman in a street-level drug distribution scheme. Because this was a federal case and the amount of meth exceeded 500 grams or 1.1 pounds, Guthmiller was suddenly facing at least 10 years behind bars as a co-conspirator. Guthmiller says, I was thoroughly confused. It was devastating. Guthmiller is 28 years old now. The charge thrust him unwillingly into a raging debate over a pillar of America's drug war: mandatory minimum sentences intended to sideline high-level traffickers. The laws have been used to sweep thousands of nonviolent small-time offenders into epic prison terms. Let's see, I think somewhere down here, right. It goes on to say, an unanticipated consequence has spawned a bipartisan movement in Washington to reform the system and motivated President Obama to offer early freedom to hundreds of nonviolent offenders. I think it also goes on to say here, see where at exactly. His judge that had to sentence him Let's see. At his sentencing in mid-February, U.S. District Court Judge John Garrod, he agreed that the 10 years was ridiculous and that his hands were tied and that he has no choice. Either he himself, the judge himself, would be breaking the law to give him anything less. Let's see, I want to scroll down here to where it says, this went on to basically say that this whole thing, yes, here it is. This is a key point in the drug law enforcement effort, which has inspired an unlikely alliance among Democrats and Republicans, many of whom gathered at the White House last week to discuss their campaign. Okay. So, yeah, it's a very, very, very interesting article. Let's see. All right. I'm going to take you back. I'm going to give you a very, very brief history here. I'm going to go back to the mid-90s. Okay? Mid-90s. Mid-90s, there were persons. I don't know if it was a rash of incidents. All I know is that here in the South Jersey area, and I think also in other areas of the U.S., people who were in a great deal of pain were not given proper pain management. Of course, you're always going to have your slew of back pain sufferers, be it a real sufferer such as myself or other people. Anyway, their pain management was not properly addressed. Lawsuits ensued, and what came of it was lawsuits where hospitals ended up having to pay out a lot, either in settlements or just simply awards. The outcome, suddenly hospitals and doctors were like, fine, you want them to have the opioids? They're going to have the opioids. Fast forward to late 90s, early 2000s, because I've always been a low wage earner my entire life. Whenever I pay a visit to an ER with no insurance, I always know what's coming next. The slew of phone calls, when are you going to pay? When are you going to pay? These phone calls will persist for a number of months before the hospital will finally come to the realization, I'm dirt poor and you're never getting your money. I don't know, bill the state, do whatever, but you're not getting it from me. So late 90s, early 2000s, one such trip to the ER room. I can't really remember if it was a cardiac incident, because I have had a number of incidents where there have been severe chest pains, and then there are also contusions, ankles, falls, stuff like that. What do you call it? But the point is that I get phone calls. I started to get phone calls. I'm like, oh, here it goes. They'll call for a few months until they finally realize they're not getting shit. But the phone calls began to get strange. Suddenly, they really weren't talking at all about the amount owed. All they really wanted to talk about was my treatment in the ER. Was I given proper pain management? I'm like, huh? I guess, because, long before the whole incident with leaving people to suffer, I never really, I'm not a complainer. When it comes to pain, I'm not a complainer. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I know that people don't really believe you, when you are in pain, so I just don't even complain. And I never say anything about my back pain because, well, like I said, nobody's going to believe you anyway. My trips to the ERs, when I was hit by the car, on the Black Rider, all of that stuff is just done. Well, number one, because I am injured, and number two, it's definitely for documentation. My attorney, things like that. But I don't actually expect anybody to actually help me at the hospital. It's ridiculous. Nobody's going to believe you. So, but yeah, suddenly there was this, big push of, where's your pain managed correctly? And I'm like, I found it very strange. And fast forward a few more years, like 2004, 5, something like that. I had a few trips to the hospital for work-related injury, that's workers' comp. And I had an MRI of my back, and like I say, the injury to the back, it's so not faked. It's very real. The primary injury to the vertebrae, you don't have to be a radiologist to see it. I can just hold the film up to the light, and you'll see it. And then there are other smaller injuries that probably would take a trained eye by a radiologist to be able to see and detect. But yeah, so I'm at this doctor, and he walks out the room with my film, holds it up to that little that lit up wall box thing or whatever, and he comes right back in immediately. I mean, it was as if he walked through a revolving door. He went out the room and came back in just that fast. He didn't have to strain to look to see where is the injury, is something real here. He comes back in with a prescription for 40 Vicodin. I was like, wow, that seems a bit much. 40 Vicodin, and that was supposed to, I was supposed to come back in like 2 days to see if additional treatment was needed. And I'm like, wow, that really seems like a lot of medication, for, Anyway, with that, between that incident and other incidents, such as my surgically rebuilt ankle, although it wasn't workers' comp, when it came to charity care, and because you're facing permanent disability, and it's the state that's paying for the surgery, it follows very, very similar guidelines, or whatever you want to call it, for similar to workers' comp. Meaning they want to get you back to work immediately. I can understand, because they don't want to have to pay disability. This surgeon, now mind you, I did have rather significant surgery. When I had my prescription filled post-surgery, a good friend, they went to pick up the prescription, and I knew it was going to be a large bottle of these. It was Percocet that was prescribed. But good God, he came back with an entire box of Percocet. Holy shit. I could not believe that it was that much class 3, narcotics. I was like, floored. I suppose it could also be said as a testament to the surgeon's skill, post-operation, there was not too much pain of the surgical site during the convalescent period. The incision, while I was on strict bed rest, because one of the things that I was fearful of is that, oh my God, when I wake up and after the initial anesthesia wears off, I'm going to be like in a shitload of fucking pain. Luckily, that was not the case. The surgeon, they did their operation, And there was not a lot of initial pain, after the surgery while I was convalescing. That pain would come later as I began walking and weight bearing, But point is that during my bed rest convalescence, I consumed very little of this Percocet. Um, there was like 2/3 of this box of medication that was still left over. And the whole point that I'm making here is that it became very obvious that this surgeon, they deliberately overprescribed. The reason being, they wanted me feeling no pain. They wanted me to have more than enough medication. Without them telling me, they gave the prescription, the dosage instructions. They gave it to me written and they spoke it to me orally. But it is their hope, their unspoken hope that you're going to abuse it, Get yourself nice and high so that when you go to the doctor, you're going to be feeling no pain for your post-surgical examinations. So they're hoping that the amount of the medication given to you will last you until they're willing to put you back to work. And you go back to work, and then eventually the medication runs out, and then suddenly you're left with a fucking shitload of pain. But hey, guess what? You've been discharged from care. It's not their problem any longer. You said that you were feeling okay. You had people hopped up on pain pills. So this is what's going on, prior to this heroin epidemic, So in case anybody's wondering, why is this recent heroin epidemic sweeping the nation, that's just this one man's observations as to what was going on, Anyway, so like I said, I had all that prescription medication left over, and I suspect that I'm not the only one. I think a lot of these adults, parents, had a great deal of this medication left over, and of course, eventually their children got into it, and long story short, we see what happened, what ensued, the heroin epidemic among the middle class white. This is where I'm segueing here. I'm going to see if I can move a little quicker through my spiel, because I know I'm getting kind of long here. They talked about these harsh sentences. It's spoken of in a context as if it were something new. It's not. For this Leo Guthmiller, for every one of him, and my heart does go out. 10 years does seem harsh if that's all you truly are, is just some junkie, some random junkie. 10 years does seem harsh in a federal prison, extremely harsh. But for every one of you, there are 100 black counterparts. Black, poor, low income men and women. Every bit as nonviolent as you. But nobody seemed to care. Apparently, your middle class white only began to recognize and to acknowledge these prison sentences, the harshities of this justice system, when it was their own demographic that fell into its crosshairs. I believe, was it late 90s? Charles S. Dutton produced a miniseries for HBO called The Corner. It chronicled heroin epidemic within a black community. It showed how an upper middle class black family spiraled into the depths of addiction, how it cost them everything. Although it was actors portraying it, it was for a real life family. You know, it was based on a true story. They even had the real family, on set, and they had interviews of them as well. And I believe that miniseries, it won a couple of awards. I think it won an Emmy for miniseries. So it gained notoriety as far as awards go. But where was the outpouring, the compassion? Where was the Narcan? Where was the life-saving drug then? Of course, it hadn't exactly spilled in epic proportions into the white middle class demographic. At that point, it was still a poor black person's problem. Now, don't get me wrong, drugs have always affected, impacted, and addicted people of all races and all economics. But it wasn't until it affected one particular race and demographic, your middle class white. That's when, what was it? The unlikely alliance between the left and the right. Only then were they willing to work together. I see. So, there you go. Hopefully that'll shed a little bit of light as to what helped to give rise to the opioid epidemic. They wanted to get people, be it workers' comp or state-funded surgery, they wanted to get people hopped up on as much pain medication as possible to get them back to work, to their shit jobs as soon as possible. I really have no idea if they gave a lot of thought as to the consequences of doing such a thing, because it's all about dollars and cents. How much money are we going to spend giving these people disability? How much money are we going to spend on workers' comp payouts? That's all you are. It's all you're ever going to be to state, private sector, corporations. Just a number. How much money are you going to cost them? The drug treatment centers, because they also went on to talk about drug court, drug treatment centers. I'm not really going to say too much here. Okay? I'll just put it like this. A particular demographic of their own are profiting very greatly from drug treatment centers. I'll leave it to your own resources to find out who that is. Let's just say they're really good at banking. Okay, guys. Hopefully that sheds a little bit of light. And there you have it. Total Control 871.